We are live with a very special Wednesday edition of Stat Chasing. We're through 10 weeks of the NFL season, and Best Ball Bros are frantically scouring their portfolios, looking for Christian McCaffery teams that they can delude themselves into thinking have a snowball's chance in hell of advancing. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Freiermuth.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally this boys. You're right.
I think we owe the people an explanation, Drico, for why we were not here for our typical Tuesday show. Unfortunately, PFF did not have the expected points metrics up for running backs, which is a key component for our running back charts. So we waited until the last minute on Tuesday, hadn't heard anything from PFF, and then we decided to push the show for one day, assuming that surely the expected points would be up the next day. They still are not up, so we're just rolling on with the show. We're going to have 2 fewer charts for you tonight, but I think we'll still have the same hard-hitting analysis that you're tuning in for.
Yeah, and to be honest, it felt kind of inappropriate to have two separate. We had
I don't know if I'm lagging or you're lagging, but I am not hearing you right now. If you can hear me, go ahead and type in the private chat. Yeah, Paul with an excellent comment. I would absolutely highlight your comment if I could hear Paul, because that is great. But Drico is on the 1s and 2s. Producer Mark says he believes that Drico is lagging, and I don't even think I am able to present the charts because, again, Drico is controlling that. So we'll just we'll kill some time here while we wait for Drico to come back. Let's see. So week 10, I'm not going to get into the meat of anything until we get Drico back here for the charts. Week 10 for me was an okay week. Didn't have anything super exciting on the main slate. Had a couple dog bowl teams that had a chance and then had their dreams dashed per usual.
okay.
I believe we have Drico back now.
When you said I don't know if I'm lagging or if you're lagging, I immediately cut off in the stream. Lost all internet access, so I think we can safely say it was me who was lagging.
Well, I'm glad you made it back because my vamping abilities were we were getting near the end of my vamping rope there. So
I'm sure you had plenty left in the bag.
Well, we can as soon as you're able, we can go ahead and get the charts up here and dive right into them. I've kept the people waiting long enough here.
Yeah, 5 minutes into the show, we said it was going to be the quickest show ever, but we're actually going to make up for it with complete fluff. No stat talking whatsoever. 5 minutes of stat talking. 2 hours and 25 minutes of absolutely nonsense.
So why don't you go ahead and just for
so we've got expected points from passing, which that's kind of our main volume metric for quarterbacks, and then we've got adjusted yards per attempt, which is our kind of main efficiency metric. And then the size of the bubble corresponds to rushing yardage, because obviously that's a big component of quarterback fantasy scoring.
Yeah, and if you are tuning in for the very first time in week 10, welcome. And let us know in the comments. I highly doubt that there's anyone who this is their first ever stat chasing show that they're watching, but it would be fun to know that. The first note I had on this quarterback chart, though, was a guy that we've both since he has gotten the start this season, we've both been certified haters, and that's Russell Wilson. So he's still in a pretty favorable spot on the chart, albeit he's come down.
Can't keep getting away with this.
He can't keep getting away with it. And I did watch every snap of this game.
Nobody watches a film like a hater.
Yeah, exactly. There's no motivation better than wanting to make sure that you're well informed to hate on a player that you think is bad. And he was really bad. I heard a couple people whose opinions that I respect say that he had a good game. I didn't really see that. To be perfectly objective, I will say he had one excellent throw. That was the Mike Williams touchdown. That was just an absolute dot. Like, that was where it needed to be. It's a great throw. It was clutch. It was the textbook definition of what a big time throw is. So I don't want to take the good things away from him, but I do want to point out, like, what we're getting from Russell Wilson is, like, in a lot of ways measurably worse than what we were getting from Justin Fields. I'm like not so thoroughly convinced that because Russell Wilson is chucking up these deep shots and they're connecting, that it's substantially different than what they'd be getting from Justin Fields. So just from watching this game, he took 3 sacks on 33 dropbacks. That's not good. Threw an interception. Only had a 50% completion percentage, 14 completions on 28 attempts. But he does keep throwing touchdowns. So that is, that is hard to argue with. And then he does get a really good matchup against the Ravens this week. So are you in on Russell Wilson this week? Would you be playing him in any daily or weekly formats?
So I guess just running through the numbers here on Russell Wilson. If we're being fully honest, so week 10 was by far the worst week of his season so far, where he had adjusted yards per attempt in week 7 and 8 of 10.5, 10.6, and then down at 7.5 in week 10. And what's kind of interesting is that despite the low completion percentage, that's still pretty close to the upper part of the chart. So even on that bad week. But then if you look, I guess when you factor in those sacks, he comes down to 6.4 per drop back, which I think that's a kind of like a feature of Russell Wilson's game, where we talked about this last year, where he's usually a lot worse on per drop back metrics than per attempt. And then regarding the matchup with the Ravens, I mean, the Ravens are quarterback kingmakers. Like, obviously Joe Burrow is great, but he's exploded both weeks he played him. Like, Jameis played really well against them. The Raiders had a functional passing attack against them. So obviously that is like a kingmaker spot. I guess my question would be is how deep is the quarterback pool in the dailies this week?
Yeah, I actually have not been able to draft a single dog bowl draft yet this week. I've just had a busy week of real life. So I will be putting in a lot of my entries in the back half of the week here, hopefully. So I have not been able to dive into where he's going in the daily drafts or anything like that yet. I'll say just so
we've got Lamar, we've got Jalen Hurts, we've got Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels. Jalen Hurts he's on Thursday. Jaden Daniels on Thursday. So those guys come off the slate, and you've got Mahomes, CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is off the slate. Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. So then I guess you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Jordan Love. 5, 6, 7, 8. So in your quarterback 8 and 9 range, you're looking at Jared Goff, you're looking at Bo Nix, you're looking at Sam Darnold. And I mean, like, to me, that's certainly not so deep that Russell Wilson is out of play. I think he actually gets pretty interesting. I think those Jared Goff against Jacksonville, Bo Nix against the Falcons, those are pretty interesting as well. Sam Darnold against the Titans, but that strikes me as kind of very playable.
Here's a fun one: Anthony Richardson against the Jets or Russell Wilson?
Probably Anthony Richardson.
Interesting. I think even as captain of the Russell Wilson hater fan club, I think I'm Russ there. And the reason for it is the way that Russ is getting there is through this super high volatility, like deep shot, extreme efficiency, and so if you're going to play Russell.
Is that not how Anthony Richardson gets there?
I mean, yeah, but we've seen it from Anthony Richardson so infrequently. And like with Russell Wilson, at least he can complete double-digit passes. Like Anthony Richardson is completing like 2 or 3. And so my point with Anthony Richardson is I don't want to play him with any of his receivers, where with Russell Wilson, the way that he's going to get there, like I pretty much know I can play him with George Pickens and have that be good. So I'd be mindful and cognizant of the combinatorial ownership between Russ and Pickens and want to make sure that that's not super chalky. Like, for example, last week, if you took a Jets receiver in the dog bowl, Aaron Rodgers was paired so frequently with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson that was just a spot that I was avoiding almost entirely. Like he was, more than twice the rate some of the other quarterbacks with pass catchers were getting paired at their receivers. So that was a spot that was pretty easy in my mind to just be like, yeah, I don't want to be competing with double the amount of teams if Rodgers is the guy you need compared to half the amount of teams if Baker Mayfield is the guy you need, right? So
I mean, I have to imagine an extraordinarily high percentage of the Russell Wilson teams are Pickens teams. Like, yeah, that seems like an absolute kind of like consolidation funnel.
Typically, the way and the reason you see that in the draft streets is because the quarterback is going for free, like going in the 6th round, but they're viable. Yeah. Just like you're saying this week, like the pool is thin enough that the quarterback is going to get drafted most of the time, and their receiver is an option high enough up that people are wanting to stack with them. That's like one of their better stacking options rather than like it being the 3rd option on a team that they've drafted or something. So I would agree with you. It's probably going to be pretty chalky. So it's just something where if you have a way to predict the combinatorial ownership, that would be super helpful. And I think that's something that I would be paying attention to this week. I did have one last fun Russell Wilson stat before we move on. So the only quarterbacks with a worse pressure to sack ratio in the NFL this season with more than 80 dropbacks. This is a really fun list. So Jameis Winston, Spencer Rattler, Will Levis, Caleb Williams, Tyler Huntley, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew, Tua, and Baker Mayfield. So there's two quarterbacks that are starting level quarterbacks. I mean, I guess if you want to call Caleb Williams a starting level quarterback, there's 3. But he's down there with the very worst of them as far as taking sacks when pressured. So.
Oh yeah, and that's been Russell Wilson's entire career.
Yeah.
We suppose going into this year that he wouldn't be able to compensate for that as well as he did earlier in his career. He has been able to do that thus far. But yeah, I don't know. The part I'm struggling with is that it's still Russell Wilson, and just because we've gotten 2 very good games, 1 okay game, I guess when it's like Anthony Richardson, who like has that rushing upside, who has that same volatility, versus Russell Wilson, that I have a little bit more trouble with that, but we don't have to belabor that disagreement.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see the Anthony Richardson side of it. I think I'm a little worried about the matchup against the Jets there, but again, Anthony Richardson's probably one of the quarterbacks where the matchup like matters the least. He's not going to complete passes on any defense. It doesn't matter if they're super easy or super tough matchup. It's really just like, can he hit 1 or 2 of the major deep shots?
Right. And it's kind of like, He's had a rough year, but he's had some like absolute mega ceiling fantasy games. So like just because we haven't seen that lately, I don't want to discount that as like a possibility.
Yeah.
Like that's the part that I'm struggling with. Whereas like just because we haven't seen it lately, like you can't get it twisted that like Anthony Richardson still has like mega fantasy upside.
Yeah, I mean, just getting multiple rushing touchdowns in a game can certainly do that for you, and that's always.
Or like if he hits 2 deep shots, and he has 2 rushing touchdowns, like you say, like that's a big week.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next. Really, I wanted to highlight both the quarterbacks on either side of this matchup, and that's the Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert matchup this week. So with the Chargers, we had been getting this new pass-happy version of the Chargers where they're actually positive PROE for 3 weeks in a row. Then all of a sudden, they go back to their run-heavy ways this week. Now, they're against the Bengals, who are also pretty pass-happy. It looks like an interesting matchup. I mean, not like the purest of spots that we've seen this season, but what do you think of this game environment? Are you excited about one of the quarterbacks, both of the quarterbacks, neither?
Well, I mean, Joe Burrow is always going to be a good play, he's always like a good projection, or he will be for most of this year. I see T. Higgins is kind of limited in practice, and there's some chance that he could play. If T. Higgins is playing, like, then Joe Burrow is just like lights out phenomenal. Like that offense kind of lights it up. Obviously, he's been able to be pretty functional without T. Higgins, so that's not like a death knell. But you have to be interested in Joe Burrow. With Justin Herbert, I guess the fact that we saw that like trend broken means that you in the pass rate over expected, you probably have to go back to the season average of -5% being your expectation. So then you've got this low volume expectation and the requirement for the offense to be chasing the game, or for him to be ultra efficient to get there. So Justin Herbert, a lot thinner. It's still Justin Herbert. I don't want to rule that out, but that is a lot thinner. And then we know that the Bengals have been a little bit of a run funnel as well.
Yeah, they did. They did actually use Justin Herbert in the rushing game a little bit this last week. I want to pull up his actual. So yeah, he had 9 attempts for 32 yards and a touchdown. So I think I joked with you about they just looked at Justin Herbert and said, "Do you want to try just like being Lamar for a little bit? How do you feel about that?" They did have him run a lot more this game. He had some design stuff as well, including that carry on 4th down at a little off the goal line, but he converted it for a touchdown. So, yeah, I mean, Herbert's interesting to me. I think that you really want to be, if you're going to be playing Herbert in fantasy, you want it to be in a matchup where you can be pushed. I definitely think the Bengals can do it, and they'll play fast enough where this game has the potential to shoot out. I want to pull up the total for it. I was looking at it earlier. I think it's relatively high on the week. It's probably like the 4th or 3rd highest. Let's see. So it is tied for the 4th highest, or really tied for the 2nd highest. You got 3 games of the 47 total here, tied with the Seahawks and 49ers, tied with the Jags and Lions. Yeah, and so I'm interested in this one. This one seems like it could be one that could go over, and in that case, I'd be really interested in Herbert. I do agree with you, though, that in general, I'd feel better about Burrow. Just
right,
confident in the passing volume.
Right, and that's not going to be contrarian or anything like that. But the signal that we've been getting in prior weeks of this being an offense that kind of wants to open it up more, we have to dampen that enthusiasm a good bit now. With like a minus 10% PROE game, like that's pretty compelling.
Yeah. Okay, the next note that I had, this isn't really one that's going to be applicable for this week because the team is on bye, but I do think we should talk about it because I think it's an important development. So it looks, all the tea leaves are pointing to Daniel Jones being benched coming out of the bye. Another atrocious game from him over in Germany. Looked really, really bad. I mean, it's been over for a while for Daniel Jones, but I think it's officially over now. What do you think about Drew Lock? Like, is it gonna change anything for the Giants offense, or is it just gonna be a different flavor of bad?
Well, Daniel Jones has been truly, truly awful. And that's obviously a problem for everybody. I think that certainly the first couple of games with Drew Lock can be that can open things up a lot more, just because you have a new guy in there. So like teams, they won't know how the Giants are planning to attack them with Drew Lock. So I think you could see a couple of positive games there, and like Drew Lock isn't fantastic or anything like that, but they've got the makings of a good offense. So I think the other piece is that you take out the Daniel Jones carries from the offense, and so that adds a little bit more volume on the passing side. So I'm kind of like, I don't want to be overly enthusiastic, but I'm like cautiously enthusiastic about it.
Okay, that makes sense. I definitely could see the additional pass attempts helping the offense. I mean, really the thing that would help the offense the most is like, can they sustain a drive? That would add a lot of pass attempts to the offense. So we'll have to see coming out of the bye how that looks. We talked about this guy last week, and I think we're just going to have to talk about him like almost every week because he's going to project to be, if not the best, one of the best pure pocket passers every week. And that's Brock Purdy. Currently, he's the third highest projected quarterback on the slate. He's got a pretty good matchup against Seattle.
So when you said third highest projected, you meant he leads the team with the third highest game total or team total?
No, sorry, I meant looking at ETR projections for fantasy points. Purdy is the third highest on the slate, only behind Jalen Hurts and Lamar. He is ahead of Josh Allen.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is kind of fascinating.
And I mean, that was how I was playing it that way last week as well. I clicked Josh Allen a couple times in my dog bowl stuff. Just he was going way too high. I think I clicked him maybe 2 or 3 times out of like over 90 entries, so a very small amount of Josh Allen. And I was basically taking Purdy anytime that he made it to me in like, the late third round. Even if I didn't have a 49er already, I would just backstack him with Jennings or Pearsall, which ended up being a pretty good way to play it. Unfortunately, did not have any of those teams paired with Bijan, which was what you needed, either that or Jalen Hurts and Bijan. So, but yeah, Purdy in another great spot this week. I don't see any reason to poo-poo the spot here. Is there any reason you could give to be off Purdy this week, or is this just another smash spot?
So I'm just trying to figure out, like, I'm reading through this why his projection would be high. The base level reason is that he does have one of the highest. The one piece of PFF that was up is expected points for quarterbacks, and he does have a really high expected points from passing, and I think a big part of that is it is not so much his expected yardage, it's his expected touchdowns. So he has he's averaging an expected touchdown of 1.9 per game, and he's running at about 1.3 per game. So I guess he has some pretty good looks at the end zone, and he's running below that expectation. And so I guess that makes me think that he's kind of like a buy low, which sort of lines up with the high projection versus maybe not high outcomes that we've been getting. So yeah, I that strikes me as a good GPP play, where he's getting lots of goal line looks. He hasn't been converting them, and there's likely going to be a game where he does convert and that scores a lot of points.
Yeah, the 49ers they've just gotten a little unlucky in the red zone, and I guess luck is not the perfect word for it, because like the plays that I'm thinking of from this last game were more like unforced errors, and not on Purdy's part, but for example, I want to say it was Garendo. I can't remember which running back was in. Maybe it wasn't Garendo, but it was not CMC. Is in on pass protection, but he's lined up like just a little off the line of scrimmage, and he just flubs the pass protection and barely chips a guy, and sends a free rusher to Purdy on a play that otherwise could have been a touchdown if there wasn't a free rusher screaming down on him. Like they got the look that they wanted, and just play ends up being blown up. And you can see the left tackle just losing his shit at the running back for the guy just barely chips him and then releases out into the flat and lets the free rusher go. It's like, yeah, someone messed up the protection there. I don't know who it was, but if I had to guess, it would be the running back. And so there's stuff like that I've seen a couple times from them where it's like, wow, if this one guy hadn't messed up this play, then all of a sudden this is a touchdown. There was a route where Debo probably could have throttled down and then sat down in a soft spot in the zone and had another, at the very least, a chance to do Debo things. It's at the 5-yard line. There's probably 2 tackles he has to break or force to miss, but it's like we've seen Debo do that before. So there were a couple spots like that. He unfortunately did not throttle down. He just kept running on his route. And so there's these opportunities, like you said, they're getting these opportunities. They're in the position to score touchdowns, and they're just not scoring at the rate that they're expected, even though he still put up a very respectable fantasy game this last week. So I think I'm going to be very, very heavy on Purdy again this week. I don't think the price is likely to be high enough, given his projection. The other thing that I really am interested in is I would assume, and again, not having looked at prices, I'll actually pull up the ADP just so I can talk a little bit more educated here and not just off the seat of my pants. But I'd assume Jauan Jennings is probably going too late this week as well. We'll talk about him more later, but he really looks like he is just fully in the Brandon Ayuk role, and he is performing with it. So let's see here. Where's Jauan Jennings going? Yeah, far too late. Oh my gosh. Jauan Jennings is going after like Calvin Ridley, Josh Downs, DeAndre Hopkins, going right before Khalil Shakir, Jameson Williams, Jacoby Myers. So yeah, that's a huge mistake. I'm actually a little sad that I just mentioned this live on stream without having drafted any entries yet into the Dog Bowl. So I guess I know what I'm doing later tonight is I'm drafting as many Brock Purdy, Jauan Jennings teams as I possibly can. Yeah, Purdy's price is correcting a little bit. It's coming up relative to where it was last week when I thought he should be a lot higher. So I don't think the value is so explicit on Purdy. It's probably still good, but not great. I haven't run my stuff yet to see where I'll have him, but the Jennings price looks very wrong, like super duper wrong. All right, the last quarterback I had notes on here. Okay, this is a disgusting one, and you can just tell me no, and we can move on if you don't want to talk about this one. So, Caleb Williams, it's been really bad. I played a decent amount of Caleb Williams last week, thinking surely it's a get right spot for them against the Patriots. It was not a get right spot. They looked atrocious. Patriots defense, one of the best plays in salary cap DFS that you could have made. But yeah, do you think that with Waldron fired, do you want to just bet on like the input volatility spot of something changes in the offense and you get
I think it's a pretty solid input volatility spot, and not just because the OC is fired, but also because Caleb Williams is a rookie, and so him coming off some bad games doesn't mean that like his career is over. Like, I guess it is a really bad. It is a really bad stretch. He hasn't played well. Some of the vibes have been bad. Like, I know that there was that rumor or those noises that some of the vets also asked for him to be benched as part of the changes, which that's pretty bad vibes. However, I mean, he's the number one overall pick. We've seen him play like decent games. So I think he's fine to play with that input volatility. Like, it is a vomit stack, but I mean, it's a vomit stack where you're playing like a number one overall pick and either DJ Moore or Rome Odunze, like Keenan Allen, like that seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, I did a bunch of Caleb and Cole Kmet even last week, which, very ill-advised. But it was entirely undrafted. I might have been the only person to do Caleb and Cole Kmet. I had a couple of those last week where I was just the only person with certain combos in the dog bowl, and unfortunately they did not get home. Yeah, but maybe we can run it back this week. Who knows? Those are all the quarterback notes that I had. Did you have anyone else you wanted to touch on, or should we move on to running backs?
No. Happy to move on here. Let me zoom out a little bit. So this is our running back snaps and usage, and we're just kind of looking at who's on the field for their team and what percentage of the total team plays are carries for that player, for routes for that player, and then just so we can get the full picture on their snap count, we also look at pass blocking and run blocking. Like, pass blocking, obviously a little bit more important, just because that helps you paint the full picture of like who's trusted to do the pass blocking. Like, if you see one player on a team where he's got a bunch of pass blocking and then a lot of the routes, and then another player isn't running as many routes, you kind of know that's because the player with the pass blocks, they're trusted.
Yeah, first
Ramondre is probably the best example of that, where you see like a lot of pass blocks there. So that's kind of why he's trusted on those passing situations.
Yeah, the first guy that we have to mention is that Christian McCaffery is already all the way back. First game back, they did not ease him in the slightest. He was in his full complement of snaps, doing everything, running all the routes. So if you have Christian McCaffery and you manage, you're still alive, hopefully you can make the playoffs with him, because looks like he could be one of those, low-owned advance rate type guys in the playoffs. You're praying for health here, but he looked good to me.
Right. Yeah. That is the most notable kind of development. I mean, it's still interesting seeing Chuba still up this high, and until further notice, like, I know they have that rookie who's coming off the ACL injury. They want to ease him back in, but they just paid Chuba, and I don't see any sign of them taking him off the field. Like, I really think that the rookie's going to have to earn it, and it doesn't feel like Chuba is giving it up.
So they're on the bye this week, coming back from Germany. But would you say that next week, if we're hearing lots of noise, say people are saying, "Oh, it's the Jonathon Brooks getting his first start," you can't play Chuba this week because Jonathon Brooks is going to take a bunch of work. If that's how it materializes, where the market kind of thinks that Chuba is a stay away, because I'm assuming
Right.
on salary cap DFS sites he'll still be priced up like he's getting the work. Typically that's how
Right.
algorithms work there. They won't just all of a sudden drop the guy's price because potentially a rookie could take some away. They're more in the business of making you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I kind of like it a little bit better in draft stuff, where you're just getting it like you don't even have to pay the salary, the high salary cap count. You just get the cheap ADP.
Yeah.
And perhaps at discounted ownership too. Like that seems a little bit more compelling to me. And the reason I say that is just because with Chuba and with it being the Panthers, I know they've been having a turnaround story, but it being the Panthers makes it harder to still believe in the stealing kind of like story.
Yeah, man, and in that Germany game, there was a play where Chuba goes down really awkwardly, and his knee bends in a way that was pretty scary. He's down on the ground, like they stopped the game. The trainers come out and everything. Based on the way it looked, I thought he probably tore like an LCL or MCL or something. Turns out, I believe that you were the one that told me he just dislocated his kneecap. Is that right?
He said, "Oh yeah, I dislocated my kneecap," but I remember somebody saying like you can't actually dislocate your kneecap. Like it's more likely that the dislocated is like, but I think it's called the patellar tendon or something like that. But like yeah, he dislocated something, and that's why that weird movement happened. And it's like that can be fine for it to kind of like come back and play on.
Yeah, he goes down. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, Chuba's dead. Like Jonathon Brooks is going to come in and be the, playoff hammer here. And then the next series happens and Chuba is on the field. So what is going on? It was the wildest ride. But yeah, I think that's good analysis on Chuba that if the market's going to overreact to Brooks being active, you might be able to exploit that. Man, the other guy with, not just like an elite workload, but like absolute bell cow in a way that we just don't see anymore is Chase Brown. He got 100% of the running back carries in the last game. Now, granted, that's because the attempt that they tried to give to Khalil Herbert did not technically count as a carry because he never got possession of the ball. It's just a fumble. But still, Chase Brown with just an absurd workload. He's, I believe, got 10 high-value touches again this last week. So, like, not only is he getting a ton of carries, he's getting targets, he's getting the goal line work. The offense is good. Like, this is the nut run out for Chase Brown. And he seems to be converting on the opportunity. So last 2 weeks, 84% of the snaps. Of those, 75% fantasy useful. So not only does he have a great snap rate, in this particular outcome, them not wanting him to block it all is also helpful. That's the secret, Draco. You need to stink at pass blocking enough, but also be good with the ball in your hands. So the team's like, you know what?
And then you need your pass blocking teammate to have a season-ending neck injury.
Yes. But yeah, Chase Brown clearly had that all figured out. Tell me a story here, Draco. Is Chase Brown going to save my best ball season? Is my best ball portfolio potentially saved because of Chase Brown?
He is going to do his very best. I don't know how it's very hard to get a team from 12th place up to second place. But he's going to do his darnest to get it there.
We'll see how many of these 12th place atrocities Chase Brown can rescue from the wreckage of my best ball portfolio. Okay, another guy that I think we have to talk about is Aaron Jones. So Aaron Jones, one of my highest owned running backs in Week 10, getting a monster workload, then gets injured. When he went down, it looked like a hip to me, but they reported it as a chest injury. So I'm wondering if maybe he just like got some rib bruising or something. I'm not sure what it was, because he did ultimately come back into the game. So that's a spot to monitor. I haven't seen anything on it this week. When he went out, it was pretty heavily Akers. Ty Chandler, I mean, we talked about Ty Chandler being dead. He's definitely dead. But what do you think about Akers as like a potential stash right now? Like, is he even going to be? He doesn't look great. Is he worth anything if Aaron Jones goes down, or is this just not a valuable backfield if Jones is out?
So I guess he had 13 rush attempts, 9 routes, and 2 pass blocks. And then we can't tell what his expected points were, which absolutely stinks. Let me see if Rotoviz, if they're it all comes back full circle, if their stuff is up for Week 10, like that'll give us a good kind of like guide as to there we go, total EP. So he had 13.5 expected points in Week 10 on a roughly 50% snap rate. Not on field. No, he had on a 24% snap rate in Week 10. And then what did he I doubt he actually scored that.
No.
So he was minus 1.4 on FPOE, so he scored 12 points. So that kind of consolidation is kind of no, wait. No, that's God damn it, that's Aaron Jones. And I'm sorry. So Cam Akers was 8.2 and then minus 2.5. Okay. So he scored 5.7. So that's probably worthy of like kind of like a spot start where you're going to project for 15 points and then score 12 or 10 to 12. So I think that's like a worthy spot start where you have injuries and you can just plug a guy in there. I think that's what he is in the case of an Aaron Jones injury.
Yeah, I agree. He doesn't have like the league-winning upside, the ceiling for him there, just because we know enough about what Cam Akers is as a player. Like that outcome doesn't exist, so he's not as exciting for, if you've got a team that's already pretty strong and you're just hoping for something to supercharge it if something breaks your way. He's not that kind of handcuff. But a guy that does have that potential, I would say, number one, because he's a rookie, and number two, because the offense could get something going here down the back half, is Audric Estime. He's not on our chart yet, but I think we have to talk about him. And the reason he's not on the chart is we're using a rolling 4-week sample here. And so he just doesn't have enough snaps over that 4-week sample to show up on either of our charts yet. If he continues to get the opportunity that he got this last week, though, he'll
be on the backup chart.
Yeah, he'll certainly show up. I mean, eventually he'll make his way to the starter chart after 4 weeks of what he got this last week.
So he got I'm calculating that in Week 10 he had 38% useful snap rate, which is just below the threshold for a starter chart. So he did dominate the carries. So he had he had 14 carries, and that's of 17 total for running backs. He got 7 routes of 18 for running backs. I guess the one thing that keeps Javonte maybe keeps Javonte as a blocker, literally, is that he still had all the pass blocking snaps. So he's still their clear and obvious passing down situation back. Whereas Audric Estime, I think he's the starter on the first 2 downs and non-obvious passing situations.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, as a quick summary for this backfield, it's completely over for Javonte. It looks like Jaleel McLaughlin is never going to really have the best thing.
Oh, he's completely squeezed.
The best thing you're hoping for from Jaleel McLaughlin is like that Justice Hill week 17 from last season type outcome for him, where he randomly gets a touchdown and he breaks a long play. You know, like that's really on very limited usage. So the Jaleel McLaughlin stuff is not ever going to happen. But Audric Estime could keep consolidating this work, and if he's good, then he has some pretty strong upside. I mean, Javonte's role, now a big part of Javonte's role that was contributing a lot of the value to it was the passing game part of the role, which does not seem to be likely to be a part of Estime.
That's a tough part for him.
There's a chance he's a younger player, younger rookie, so there's a chance that he's able to develop that part of his game. And you know what he did in college is not wholly indicative of like his final capabilities as a player. But based on what we saw last game, it does seem like, you know, he's got an uphill battle to be able to win that portion of the work. If he can, that's a pretty huge win for him. But even as like a 2-down grinder, he's interesting. And you have those thin paths to league winner.
So he has 3 pass blocking snaps, and he has a grade of 75.4 on those 3 pass blocking snaps. He is not allowed a single pressure on those 3 pass blocking snaps. However, none of those have been on what PFF deems a true pass pro set. Whereas I guess a good amount of Javonte's. So Javonte's grade is 59.3. So I actually don't think it's that he's such an amazing pass blocker. He's just kind of trusted. Whereas they haven't been willing to trust Estime there. So that part is tricky. Like I have a little bit of discomfort kind of projecting that he's going to develop by the end of the season. But I think he's a worthwhile waiver pickup. But you look at things, and again, I'm referring to Rotoviz here. He had 7.1 expected points last week on his kind of like best of the season so far role. 14 of 17 carries. I think what you're looking at, you're looking at somebody who needs to get into the end zone to score points here.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. So yeah, thin path to like get to the league winner outcome. I mean, basically you're trying to hit a parlay of the Broncos get better and have more opportunities to score touchdowns, and also he's able to take away a little bit of that or earn some of the passing back role, which I think is pretty thin. I just don't think it's impossible, because again, with a rookie, you just know so little. So I think that's where you get into trouble saying like, oh, that can't happen. So it's thin,
right?
But that's the reason why we like rookies, because hey, there's an unlikely outcome, but if it does happen, like that's pretty good for a guy who could get off waivers in week 10. So
right, I'm putting in waiver bids. I'm putting in decent waiver bids.
Yep. All right. The last running back I had a note on is on the backups chart. And this is not a guy that I have been particularly high on this season due to him coming off a pretty brutal injury. But the stars are starting to align for Nick Chubb. in that he is no longer shackled to the worst quarterback that we've seen play in the NFL in the past 2 decades. The Browns still look like they want to give him the work. Like he is Jerome Ford. Look at the Jerome Ford rush attempts on this chart. Jerome Ford's bar is almost entirely routes and blocking. And then you have Nick Chubb, who is actually getting some rush attempts. He is getting the majority of the rush attempts for the team. Now, when the game got out of hand in their last game, he was just like not on the field very much because he's not doing passing down stuff. But you do have a spot against the Saints, who, I mean, we just saw Bijan run roughshod all over them. Like, what do you think about Nick Chubb this week in a pretty favorable matchup?
Yeah, that has to be interesting. It has to be interesting because he's already he's so in week 9. So they didn't play last week because of the bye. In week 9, he was at 34% of honestly, only 34% of snaps. But when he was on the field, it was to give him the ball. So very high amount of rush attempts, very high amount of so he had 11% reps. So I guess he's dominating the carries, and in a matchup where you might think that the Browns will lean on that run game, that could be pretty interesting. And I mean, I have to think that they try and as they ramp him back up. Like, we're pretty early in the ramp up stage that they do start to give him more routes because they're trusting in the pass block. Like, it's not like they don't trust Nick Chubb to pass block. They're just trying to manage his workload. But as they 2 weeks on now, as they ease him back in, I could see him getting a lot more routes. And so I guess you're probably looking at a ceiling case here of like 50% snap rate, but then that being dominated by carries and him having those vintage Nick Chubb moments, which it doesn't seem like the most likely outcome, but certainly seems possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up his ADP on Underdog. I just looked at his DraftKings salary is $6,000, so it's just like it's probably too much on a platform where you really need to have some passing component to your game. Just he's not going to get many, if any, receptions. So, but yeah, he goes in a reasonable spot. Actually, it looks like going right before Ramondre and DeAndre Swift and Najee.
I think
Pollard.
It's hard to take him over Ramondre, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's close. You probably just take Ramondre there against the Rams. That's probably the one I would flip. Maybe Swift. Or what do you think about Swift? Swift for Chubb.
That feels a lot closer. Where it's probably like similar bets where you need them to break off a long run, so,
right? Like
a long touchdown. Probably helps. It helps Swift that he's not coming off a major knee injury. It helps Chubb that he's not DeAndre Swift.
That was so good. I was just about to say that if you didn't. So.
I said the first thing to set up the second thing.
It was beautiful. Textbook. Chef's kiss. No notes. All right. On that note, let's get to the tight end charts. That was the last running back I had notes on. So for the tight end chart, I mean, I feel like there's so many guys with really good targets per route run right now, which is kind of crazy for tight end. I mean, some of these are really just like we can kind of breeze through these notes pretty quick because, like, Cade Otton, like, what new thing am I going to tell you about Cade Otton? Like, he's still it continues to be a smash. Like he's getting.
I guess the thing we look at for there is Mike Evans' return and how this looks as Mike Evans returns. Like I think he still has to be important because obviously every play can't just be a Mike Evans target. But I do wonder if he continues to like dominate targets here as Mike Evans comes back.
Yeah, I would think it's probably, I mean, not. I'm pretty confident it's a huge upgrade for the offense to get Mike Evans back. And we saw the Bucs. The Bucs were a great offense with Evans and Godwin. Like they were hanging some points up. Baker Mayfield, was the quarterback 2 on the season. So I think when you get Mike Evans back, it might be one of those things where, yes, Otton sees a small reduction in his target rate, but the offense is getting more scoring opportunities and they're able to sustain more drives. And so it's still probably I don't even really want to call it like a negative for Otton. It's probably just like a net neutral, if anything. Really losing Godwin, who is more that possession receiver operating out of the slot. Like I think Otton has assumed a lot of that work. And right now they're just like, they don't have any Mike Evans. There is no Mike Evans work or role in the offense. That's just all going through the running backs right now. Like, well, we need to do something to move the ball. So I guess the running backs are going to be a really, really large part of the offense. I would assume.
You don't think the running backs will retain ball control type, chain control type targets?
I think they will still have a good amount of work, but I think if you had to ask me where the targets for Mike Evans come from, like they certainly come from Sterling Shepard. Like those are gone. Sterling Shepard does not maintain his targets there. You probably get to take a little bit away from Cade Otton, and then I think you take a little bit away from the running backs as well. So the big picture point that I want to make is I don't think it hurts Cade Otton too bad. I think he's still a really, really strong tight end rest of the season. Like
he probably is a strong tight end rest of the season, but is he able to maintain like a 26% targets per run? Like that's a really, really strong targets per run. Like that's higher than, for example, I'm pretty sure over the last 2 weeks, where is Brock Bowers? That's higher than Brock Bowers on the full season, who's at 25%.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect him to maintain that, but like he could probably maintain a 22%. Yeah, 22%.
Right. I think that's right. I think that's right. I think it's probably closer to a small negative than anything else. I still think that is a negative, but maybe it's true that Otton is just so good that even with like a player with the caliber of Mike Evans there, that he doesn't suffer from that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, certainly. But yeah, I agree with you that it's probably somewhere between small net negative to neutral for Cade Otton. And I mean, even if you do apply a small net negative to him, he's still very, very safely a tight end 1. That's. I don't think that.
Did you say a tight end 1 or the tight end 1?
A tight end 1, not.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was like, he's safely the tight end 1. I'm like, wow.
No, we're not that bullish on Cade Otton here. I'm interested to see where he's going to go in best ball drafts next season, though, because I do think that. I mean, yes, prior to the Godwin injury, like you obviously weren't getting this, but the toothpaste can't go back in the tube on this now. Like you've seen that he is, this guy's competent. If you're going to feature him in the offense, like he can be a valid pass catching option in your offense. He doesn't just have to be like a snap eater like he previously was. And he's a young enough player that I don't think it's ridiculous to think that this could be a bit of a breakout for him and lead to more opportunity in his career. But the next tight end I had a note on was Mark Andrews, who's had quite the interesting season so far. I mean, if we go back to like week 2, week 3, Mark Andrews was 6 feet under. We were throwing dirt on the coffin, and over these last few weeks, he's definitely been back. His snaps are trending up. Now, two weeks ago, he had the highest snap share that he'd had all season. Last week, he gets the Isaiah Likely injury to kind of keep buoying his snap rate. So I'm a little cautious to just say like, oh yeah, the trend's going to continue. He's going to keep ascending and get, approach this old Mark Andrews type role and workload that we're used to. So I'm a little cautious of that, but how do you parse this? Do you think he's still ascending? Do you think he'll come back to earth a little bit with Likely healthy?
I'm still stuck on Cade Otton, and I'm sorry. I do want to make the point that his highest yards per route run on the season is 2.3, which is certainly not bad. That is not terrible. But his average, if I just take the average across every game, it's like 1.3. If I take the average over the last 4 games, it's 1.9. And in the last game, week 10, he was at 1.1. So I still may not. I don't think I'm in the camp that like Cade Otton is just good. I think you can persuade me that he's a young player and he's shown us more than we thought he was capable of. So we need to keep an eye on that. But I needed to say that because
I think that's good analysis. Could I sell you on that he is of the Jake Ferguson ilk? Perfectly competent. Like if getting targets in the offense. I mean, Ferguson this season has been pretty disappointing, more so as a function of the Cowboys just stinking out loud. But yeah, I think seeing Otton kind of in the same mold as Ferguson kind of makes sense to me there. But
yeah, so on to Mark Andrews, which you wanted to keep a good pace in the show, and I rudely interrupted. So I think that, it's a good thing that he had a 94% route rate in week 10. Like that's the highest he's had all year. It does seem likely that it's because of the Likely injury. It is also helpful that on that high route rate, he also had a 21% targets per run. He also had 2 yards per routes run. Like that all seems like competent, acceptable. I do think though that like the idea of like this being the Mark Andrews, like this offense used to be the Mark Andrews show, and like that was in this beautiful fact, and it's not the case anymore. But I think that it's such a high octane passing attack that him being just fine can lead to good results. Like I think he's pretty startable, especially in FFPC, which as people know is tight end premium. But there's nothing here that's getting me like overly excited.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp as you. I'm approaching cautiously optimistic with Mark Andrews, where before I was like, abandon all hope, ye who have Mark Andrews on your roster.
Right.
But
and I guess the other thing about his high route rate last week was just it was a shootout.
Right.
And that's Mark Andrews kind of music. Like you're not going to put in the blockers there, the run blockers. You're going to have Mark Andrews running routes.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it sounds like we're on the same page there.
Yeah. The other guy who is certainly interesting in tight end premium got a pretty impressive ADOT and targets per route run for being a rookie. He's also getting a quarterback change potentially. Is Theo Johnson, one of the highest ADOTs that we've got on the chart here for tight ends. He had a pretty athletic play. The problem. So, well, there's a lot of warts on this frog. One is he plays for the Giants. 2 is the Giants also happen to have Malik Neighbors there, who's just an absolute target sponge. He's just soaking up everything. So with Theo Johnson, like the problems are it's probably low volume. It's probably pretty poor quality passes. And so I'm like hesitant.
But he's seen 6 targets 2 weeks in a row. Like,
yeah,
put him in the category of tight ends firmly with a pulse.
Yes, yeah, for sure with a pulse. All those 20th round Theo Johnson shares that I took. I'm thinking how smart I am that he's on the back of all my rosters now. There's a lot of fragility with it. It's like, does Drew Lock target Theo Johnson as much as Daniel Jones did? Like, and that's not only a negative thing. Like, that can also be a positive. Like, if you end up getting out there and Drew Lock just happens to have a crush on Theo Johnson and he's just peppering him with targets, like, that could be a really good thing. So it's a wide range of outcomes here, but the opportunity looks like it could be there for Theo Johnson. He's on the field a lot, which is great. Like, that's really bullish for him, to be a rookie tight end that's on the field, like, damn near 100% of the time. It's pretty damn good. So I just wanted to, he's definitely worth an ad on FFPC, I would say.
Yeah.
He's harder to use in non-tight end premium formats.
But I mean, just for example, Trey McBride is on a bye week this week.
Yeah.
And I've got home leagues where. What's that?
So is Theo Johnson.
Oh yeah, good point.
But if he weren't, imagine.
Yeah, imagine. Well, Kyle Pitts is on a bye next week.
There you go.
But I think that's apart from him being like a pretty interesting stash, and not the worst flex play in tight end premium. I think that's the way to think about him for non-tight end premium. I guess he's probably borderline for playable on Dog Bowl, where you have to like it's what a draft of 12.
Yeah.
And so you like he could be tight end 12 in ADP, and that could be okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna
not this week, obviously.
Right, I'm pulling up the slate next week. I want to see if I can do some Theo Johnson. Oh baby, Theo Johnson against the Bucks on a, let's see, looks like a 10-game slate. Oh boy, okay, 20 total tight ends. Some of them are just not fantasy players. Yeah,
that's playable. That's very playable.
Yeah, he's playable next week. All right, let's mum's the word on Theo Johnson, everybody. We all get there. Man, that's the
everybody watching this. Please forget until after next week.
It's the last week to qualify too. Next week, I mean, Drico, I think it's writing itself.
It's poetry.
Zero dog bowl tickets yet, despite my efforts. Maybe I get there on the back of Theo Johnson, one of my favorite rookie tight ends to draft this whole off season. Oh, I see it now. All right.
Just with impeccable timing, Sam pops in. Okay, give me the backup tight end chart.
Unfortunately, Sam, I still have guys that I want to talk about. Oh, actually, I'm going to jump one spot in my notes to talk about a player that I know Sam is going to be happy to hear about. The Dalton Kincaid injury. I mean, it was already over for Dalton Kincaid, but do you think that the Dawson Knox, like, number one, how big a difference is there between Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid? Do you view them as at all different this week? If you were going to start Dalton Kincaid, would you just start Dawson Knox instead?
Well, to be fair, even with the kind of limited route tree, Dalton Kincaid was seeing targets. Like, if you look at the average from week 4 to week 9, you're looking at an average of about 7 targets a game. And then if just because you've set the bar so low, like I want to shit on Dalton Kincaid as much as the next guy, but when the bar is Dawson Knox, that is a lot harder to do.
And to be fair to Dalton Kincaid, the reason he didn't have a really good game this last week was that Josh Allen stunk out loud when he threw the ball to him. In fact, one of the passes was so abhorrent that it injured Dalton Kincaid. He laid out to try and get it, and he came down really awkwardly on his knee. So honestly, there have been this sounds like this is what you might hear from a Dalton Kincaid copium enjoyer, and I need to firmly state that I am not that. I'm president of the Dalton Kincaid hater fan club, but I should be way more wrong this season than it's turned out. And I drafted, I think I had like 10% Dalton Kincaid. So I came in ever so slightly overweight because I didn't want to be so confident that I was wrong or that Dalton Kincaid was bad in a situation like the Bills offense where it really looked like he could potentially consolidate a lot of targets, which would be incredible for the tight end position, right? So I would be a lot more wrong on my opinion that Dalton Kincaid stinks this year if things broke ever so slightly different for him. And I don't think a lot of that is talent related. A big chunk of it has literally just been like unlucky on the quality of some of the targets, especially like the deeper ones, which yes, those are going to be harder to complete, but still like he's been running bad on some plays that would have otherwise been splash plays for him.
Yeah. It's hard to sell me on the idea that the offense. I know the volume has been bad. The volume hasn't been great, but in terms of like the efficiency environment, he does play with Josh Allen. And it's like if you can't play efficiently with Josh Allen, it does sound like a skill issue.
I think that's the most likely outcome. I also want it to be known that in the range of outcomes, it definitely seems like Kincaid could have gotten there this season. Probably not like the top end of his range that people were thinking was possible in the summer. That didn't actually exist because he's not that talented. That's the part that we were missing. But he like an 80th percentile outcome for Kincaid would be probably like tight end 4 or something. Like he definitely could have had a really good season is all I'm saying.
Right. I mean, what people said about Kincaid was that if the Bills are going to be good, or if they're going to have a good passing attack, then Kincaid has to be a big part of that. And the Bills tried to make that happen, but it didn't work out. So, like, some of the thesis was correct, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. All right, we can move on from Kincaid. I had 2 pretty quick guys I wanted to get your opinion on real quick. We talked a little bit about this guy. So Cole Kmet, the guy I chose to lose a lot of money on last week playing in dog bowl drafts with Caleb. Is he worth a dart throw this week now that Waldron is gone?
I mean, I think Kmet is good. The problem, I guess, some of the problem is that he actually has been playing a lot of routes. It's not like they've taken him off the field for these inexplicable reasons. And I like Kmet a lot. I have a decent amount of them. But he ran 80% of routes last week on 41 dropbacks. And I guess he had 4 targets for 13 yards. And the offense did just stink. 5 targets, 70 yards. 4 targets, 57 yards. And then he had a really weird game where he didn't run that many routes in week, I think it's week 9. Or week 8. Week 8, I should say.
Yeah,
but I guess that the tight end position can be spiky. And in weeks where Caleb Williams played well, like I guess you've got that week 3 game where Kmet smashed. You've got I don't I think it's tough, but It's possible, but it's tough. Is how I'd say it. Like it's like Kmet. My baseline expectation for his talent isn't so high that I think you should just throw out per recent results.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, the other guy I wanted your opinion on, TJ Hockenson. Is he all the way back now? And is he startable this week against the Titans?
So all the way back. So he was 71% route share in week 10, up from 60%. So if you're extrapolating there, you say that could be 80% this week, which is pretty good route run for tight end. 30% targets per run. So he had 9 targets, 72 yards. I mean, I do think that like even week 3 in your first couple of games back from ACL injuries is still very much part of the recovery process, but that like getting 9 targets and 71% route rate is pretty good. So I think you can play this guy with the hope that with the idea that he's getting ramped back up. I don't think it's there yet, but I think you can play based on what we've seen so far. Pretty easily.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's definitely in play for me this week. He's a little rich for me on underdog. He's going off as the tight end 5, going ahead of Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, Taysom Hill, Sam Laporta, Tucker Kraft, Kyle Pitts. So he's going a little rich. I don't even know that that's necessarily wrong. But I mean, I think another part of it too is like the pumpkinification of Sam Darnold might be contributing to the fact that like that might be leading to this inordinate target share for TJ Hockenson, where Darnold is just like regressing back into the Darnold that we were pretty familiar with over his career so far. And so Hockenson is just really nice safety blanket for him. And I wonder if he just continues to lean on him heavily like we saw in this last game. So that's another wrinkle there that I just want to keep an eye on. Okay, we spent a lot of time on the tight end chart here. I did have one last thing where I just want to rapid fire and ask you how dead these fringe tight ends are that we are drafting in best ball. So if you're looking at a best ball roster and you see this tight end on your lineup, is this a guy that's totally dead, or he could randomly do something for you in the playoffs? So just quick answers. I'm going to hit you with some names here. First one, Noah Fant.
Noah Fant. That seems pretty bad. Pretty bad. And I guess some of that's because he's injured. But so I guess if I'm being fully respectful here, he's put up some decent games. So like you can I guess I'm gonna change my mind there looking at this data that you can get some solid games from Noah Fant. Like that seems pretty realistic.
Let's sit on the backups chart while we go through the rest of these names, because that's where a decent number of them live. There's Noah Fant right at the top. Juwan Johnson.
Oh, that's like so fucking bad.
That's not good. Colby Parkinson.
Did he get hurt?
He was hurt 2 weeks ago. Last week, I believe he was not on the injury report. He just got significantly outsnapped by Davis Allen. All the Sharks, all the showdown Sharks were slamming Davis Allen.
Yeah, I don't think he got a target. He's not showing up on that.
No, Parkinson did not. It was Davis Allen all day.
Yeah, that's not great for him. So yeah, if he's gotten cooked, then he's cooked.
Okay, Dalton Schultz.
So, Dalton Schultz was drafted much higher than all of these guys. So the fact that he's like in this discussion is really bad.
Yes. You got Nico coming back, and he hasn't been able to earn anything with Nico gone. I think it's curtains for Dalton Schultz. Tyler Conklin.
I'm forced to start him in my home league this week, so I hope he's
My
I
condolences.
hope at least this week he can do something. So you're looking at pretty like in the last 4 games he's played 77% route run. You're looking at 10% targets per run. You're just hoping for a touchdown here. This is like you should have drafted him in like round 18 in BBM, and you're hoping you can get a touchdown.
Yeah. All right, last one. Pat Freiermuth.
Pat Freiermuth. Oh my God. Did you? By the way, did you see in Davis's Discord that somebody tagged all and said, "Oh hey, Pat Freiermuth or Noah Fant or something like that." That was very funny.
Yeah. So, Pat Freiermuth, dead or alive?
Based on where you drafted him, pretty dead here. Yeah.
All right, let's move to the wide receiver charts. We'll bring it home. I think we're going to get out of here under 2 hours pretty safely, Drico. That's a milestone for us. So the first guy, I mean, we got to talk about this guy. He's coming off a bye, so nothing new happened this last week. But I do think we've got to talk about him this week. How are you treating JSN this week? Are you just assuming the breakout is going to be the new normal and you want to play him aggressively into San Francisco? Or how are you handling him here?
So you can't ignore a breakout like that where he just completely dominates, and they completely changed his routes. They had him from like running only predominantly short stuff to just covering every blade of grass, and he dominated coming out of the bye week. I can't see them like ignoring that. So I'd be like cautiously optimistic that he continues that kind of run, but I guess you have a good chance of DK Metcalf coming back and that equalizing out. But I'm like cautiously optimistic that's going to stick.
Let me hit you with a couple guys that are going ahead of him right now in underdog drafts. Cortland Sutton or JSN?
Oh, JSN. That's not a question.
Cedric Tillman or JSN?
JSN. Are these the guys that are going ahead of him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, baby.
Calvin Ridley or JSN?
JSN.
Yeah, I like have 1 week where I'm not able to draft early in the week prior to projections being out, and we've got shit like Drake London being drafted after Cortland Sutton. What's going on, people? What are you doing? Hello?
Yeah, that's a little wild.
Hello. Anyone out there? Are there any signs of intelligent life anywhere? JSN or DeAndre Hopkins?
I think it's JSN. Like just because you saw a life of that like incredible ceiling. Whereas I think Nuke has a better ceiling than those other guys, but I'm still favoring JSN right now.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like the theme of this episode has been can we actually play Chicago players? So Keenan and DJ Moore, both are on this chart. They both live. Odunze too. All three of them live in this bottom left quadrant. Like, I wonder how many teams even can have all three receivers in the bottom left quadrant of the first wide receiver chart. Like, that seems incredible to me. I don't think we've ever seen that before.
So, I mean, what that suggests to me is that these guys, they all they have a lock on route share, but they're kind of cannibalizing each other. None of them is kind of like setting ahead of the other, like separating ahead of the other in targets, and none of them is actually separating in terms of production either. So that does make it tricky. Like, who do you pick? I think you probably like picked a rookie, I think Keenan Allen is probably the odd man out there if you're trying to figure out what has to change, given he's the older guy. Is how I would look at that.
Yeah, I'm. Gosh, I want to be brave and play the Bears again after they just stunk out loud with. I don't know how. I'm gonna have to do some soul searching and think about how volatile I think this spot really is, or if it's just gonna be the same Bears but with a slightly different odor. Like, am I switching from just like jar full of farts to terrible body odor? Like, is that what I'm huffing when I play the Bears? So I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure out if I'm willing to do that to myself again. Those are honestly the only wide receivers I wanted to talk about on this chart. I didn't everyone else. I feel like, not a ton has changed. We kind of know what these guys are.
I guess we could do like a check-in of Devontae and Garrett Wilson, where I guess I was kind of wrong on the amount of targets that Devontae could earn, but then you look at the ADOT, and it's like all short stuff. So Devontae has this like good volume of short ADOT targets, whereas if you look at Garrett Wilson, his ADOT is in the last two games has been short. Over the year of the season, it's 9.7, and his target count has been lower. So maybe I was probably a little bit premature in saying that he's kind of the alpha there. Like, I think if you watch the games, he's clearly a better receiver. But I guess the trust factor with Devontae is important for Rodgers. Even if it's not working better than Garrett Wilson targets, that trust factor does seem important.
Yeah, I mean, he got an absurd. Did he get 13 targets this last week? Yeah. So
versus 6 for Wilson.
When you're getting that much volume, like you just can end up with a monster game. Like if you get 13 targets, like good stuff can happen. Especially when, if you get Rodgers with like that locked in on one guy mode where he will do that. Especially like when you get down and you get some end zone opportunities, like you could easily get a 3 touchdown Davante Adams game. So here's the problem. The Jets are so slow with their pace of play that it makes me really hesitant to ever play Rodgers. Like I honestly am like getting to the point where I don't know that Rodgers is even a viable play. Like on Underdog, I don't think Rodgers is really a viable play, like almost ever. He has to be going last round, and even then, like the slate has to be super short, so there's just not a lot of competition at quarterback. Like he can't get passed by that many people. So I guess in weeks like these where there's a decent number of buys, that would be like a time when you could consider Rodgers. But I think for the most part, I just want to play. If I am going to be playing Jets receivers, I don't want to stack them. And I talked about this earlier in the show. Like you saw such a high rate of Devontae and Garrett Wilson being stacked with Rodgers last week that if you don't stack with Rodgers and one of those guys hits and Rodgers doesn't get there, you're at such an advantage because so many of the teams that have Adams and Wilson are taking this free stack with Aaron Rodgers and then just hamstringing themselves when like you can just say, hey, it's the week where Devontae Adams gets 2 touchdowns and Aaron Rodgers throws for 220 yards and those 2 touchdowns. And I don't give a shit about those Rodgers points. Like that doesn't do anything for me. Give me Brock Purdy, who's going to throw for 3 touchdowns, but they're going to be spread out. And so I don't, I'm happy to have Devontae with Brock Purdy instead of taking Aaron Rodgers. So
the only thing, it is kind of wild that Davante had 13 targets and only 94 air yards.
Yeah.
It's hard. It is hard for me to see that being like a big like touchdown game, but it can certainly happen. But I do want to like kind of make that note. And I'm sorry for interrupting. Your excellent point.
No. I agree with you. It's not like in the past when Davante was getting 13 targets and they were coming further down the field, and he'd be putting up 150, 180 yards on those targets. Like, what I'm thinking is it's much more likely that if he is going to get there on this high target volume, low ADOT stuff, it's because the Jets are actually functional on offense, get a couple of opportunities, and he's able to convert that way. Right. But you would think normally if that was like, oh, this is my thesis on how this player gets here, this is the most likely outcome for him to be a guy you need in a week, be like, great, that's a great spot to stack with the quarterback. And even if Rodgers has like a 2-touchdown game, like even a 3-touchdown game from Aaron Rodgers is probably like, you're not going to get 300 passing yards from Aaron Rodgers. Like they don't run enough plays. It's so hard to get 300 passing yards for him. Like,
especially true Davante, like 94 air yards and then 31 actual like real boy yards on 13 targets. Like, yeah,
like Rodgers, the highest yardage total. Let's see, I'm just going back over his last 5 games. So he did hit 294 yards once. That was against the Bills. But other than that, it's been like 151, 211, 233, 276. And the games where he actually like put up a decent number of yards, one of them was the Pittsburgh game where they're just like getting clobbered and they're just in full come from behind mode, right? So they're actually throwing and playing with some semblance of pace, not like what you actually should be doing, still too slow. And then the Bills game where they were trailing a bunch and were passing.
You want to know the last time Rodgers eclipsed 300 passing yards?
Oh, man.
It was week 14 of 2021.
Yeah. So
3 years ago.
I'm going to not play Aaron Rodgers in weekly formats, and I'm going to sleep like a baby. But that doesn't mean that I'm out on his receivers. God, it feels gross. I might have a sprinkle of either of them this week against the Colts.
Yeah, just because they've been such a poor defense.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, moving on. And so this is our 70 to 85% reps run guys. These are guys who are still starters, very firmly starters. They're just not at the close to 100% rep rate that the first chart is.
The first guy that I wanted to talk about here was Jauan Jennings. So on the preview show that Pat and I do over on the Leg Up channel every Friday, we talked about the 49ers spot last week because I was really in on Brock Purdy. And we discussed, Ricky Pearsall versus Jauan Jennings. And I was pretty excited about Pearsall potentially getting the breakout out of the bye, getting more opportunity. Just he's the first round pick. Maybe they want to see what he can do. And Pat really kind of grounded me on Jauan Jennings. It's Jennings has been really good this year. I think it's Jennings over Pearsall straight up. And early in the game, I almost after the Ricky Pearsall, long touchdown, I almost messaged Pat I should have just slammed Pearsall. I knew it. And then Jennings goes on to just earn an incredible amount of targets, looks pretty good the whole game. I just think there's too large a projection gap right now, and there probably will be for a little while because it's just you can't. It's going to be hard to project Jauan Jennings to be 90% of Brandon Ayuk, but I don't think it's that.
That's what he's playing like.
Yeah. And so Deebo Samuel is getting projected this incredible play every slate. And Jauan Jennings is not that different in my opinion. And so you got the target volume again last week. He's getting deeper down the field stuff. I'm pretty in on Jauan Jennings. Playoff best ball hero from last year. Maybe there's a chance he runs it back this year. I like Jauan Jennings a lot. I'll probably have a ton of him this week. That's probably where I'm just going to – I looked at the ETR projections. They've got him – they agree more with the underdog market. They've got him lower. That's a spot where I'm just going to disagree. I'm just going to smash Jauan Jennings this week. And the problem with that, this is the most likely outcome is this ages poorly, but it's because the 49ers distribution of points can be volatile because there's a lot of weapons there. Even with Jauan Jennings, you've got George Kittle, you've got Christian McCaffrey, you've got Debo, and then you've got Jennings and Pearsall. And I think all 5 of those guys are live to have a good game in any given week. That is part of what makes the 49ers so good, is their offense can work by getting lots of different viable weapons the ball. So I'm not saying it's a sure thing that Jauan Jennings gets there this week. I'm just saying that he is not being priced at what his ceiling his ceiling outcome is not being respected in his price. That's all.
Yeah, and so you obviously you don't want to get too carried away about one good game. However, if you look at week 1, he had sorry.
Bless you.
He had a 26% target spread run. Week 3, it was 35%. Week 4, it was 30%. Week 6, it was 29%. And then last week, it was 28%. So, to his credit, he has been a consistent volume earner in the offense.
He is a guy they like to target in the end zone, too. Even go back to last year when they had all of their guys healthy. Jauan Jennings would still get end zone targets because he's a big-bodied guy and they like him down there. And so, Jauan Jennings, grab the edge with both hands and hold on to it while you can. We're not guaranteed to make it, but it's a good spot, man. I think it's a really good spot.
Yeah, I agree. Your next note was about Tyreek Hill, and when do we start to get worried? When do we start getting concerned? I mean, it's hard not to be worried, right? Where this is a dramatic fall off from last year and the year before. And the wrist injury could certainly be a part of it, but this is a big fall off.
Yeah, I mean, I looked back at his game log with Tua. So the game log with Tua this year so far, let me go back and pull this up. So he has 4 full games with Tua this season. He's averaging 74.5 yards and half a touchdown per game. So definitely worse than last season, right? He's averaging astronomical numbers last year. But it's not such a huge deviation from last year. He's had 3 games that, for most receivers, you would say are pretty good, like 70-something yards, 80-something yards, 130 yards. He has the 12 target, 130-yard game in week 1. But then, other than that, you have some okay games, you're mentioning, 70-yard games. And then last week he had the 16-yard game. Yeah, last week was a stinker.
Given just a consistent domination from Tyreek in 23 and 22, this is a stark contrast. Stark.
The one thing I'll say to add a little bit of context to last week's game, if you watched that game, it was one of the strangest games. I believe there were 5.
There was back-to-back turnovers.
There was so many turnovers. Yeah, I mean, if you were playing that showdown slate, you needed the kickers and you needed defenses because that's all that game really was. So, I mean, it was.
But he's not a victim of that circumstance. He's an active participant.
Yeah, I mean, he's not out there throwing the interceptions or he was not fumbling the ball,
right, but if he's getting open for easy scores like he normally does,
right,
then why don't they just easy button, throw deep to Tyreek.
Right.
Like,
so yeah, no, I'm with you here. It's definitely a little concerning. The wrist injury stuff, like only now getting brought to our attention, I feel like probably adds, like, it just adds a lot of panic to like the market sentiment on Tyreek. And I don't know, like the wrist injury, like it's not going to affect his ability to get open or run routes. Like unless the guy's out there like running on his hands and I'm not seeing it, like really the only thing that we should be concerned about is it actually impacting his ability to catch the ball, or is it shifting the way that the Dolphins are using him because they don't want him to have to make like deeper down the field target or deeper down the field catches because that's harder on his wrist or something. And I don't know, that's, just speculating there, but if you made me pick a side here on, Tyreek's going to be fine versus Tyreek's not going to be fine, I think I just want to be on the Tyreek's going to be fine side and benefit from that when the market's wrong.
So where is he at? What's his ADP in dog bowls right now?
Yeah, Tyreek goes. So he's 4.
Because you didn't say the market. You said the market, but you meant me.
No.
Market takes.
No. I mean, the market is. Like if you're out there in the streets, like people are panicking about Tyreek. They're like asking, like, "Oh, should I trade Tyreek in my season-long league?" Like people are legit worried about Tyreek. But his ADP is 14.5. He's going after Puka. Him and George Pickens go back to back. Yeah, I mean,
that seems appropriate. That seems more like this guy hasn't done shit all year, rather than like a true panic price.
Yeah, I think I'll probably have a lot of Tyreek this week. I think if Tyreek and Jauan Jennings are the wide receivers that you need this week, I'm getting a dog bowl ticket. So,
well, I hope they are.
All right. The other notes. This one we don't have to spend any time on. This note just says George Pickens is so effing good, because he is. I mean, might be a top 5 NFL receiver right now, in my opinion. Okay, couple quick ones. Josh Downs with Anthony Richardson back. I mean, we saw really good stuff from Josh Downs outside of the very frustrating drop for a walk-in touchdown last week. But he has looked great. But do you think it's a significant downgrade with AR back?
Flacco's been so bad. I kind of don't think so.
I hope you're right. I would really like for Josh Downs to keep being good because he's a fun player.
It's hard to get 10 targets and put up a bad game. 10 targets for 72 yards. That doesn't seem like irreplaceable efficiency to me.
Yeah, I think I am a little more pessimistic than you, but I would be so happy to be wrong. The other guy I had a note on was Terry McLaurin. Going against the Eagles, who have not been great in pass coverage. Really, the Eagles have one good DB in Cooper DeJean. And outside of that, they leave a lot to be desired. What do you think about Terry McLaurin this week here against the Eagles tomorrow night?
So, I guess just to think about Terry McLaurin, he's averaging a 23% targets per run this year. With that's been about 100 air yards per game. So he's at 23% targets per run with a pretty high ADOT. And with that normally comes kind of volatile games. And that's kind of what we've seen here, where he opened the year 17 yards, 22 yards, then he hit 100 yards, 52 yards, 112 yards. In week 9, he had 19 yards and 113 yards. So I think what you're getting here is kind of like a pretty volatile play, and then when he hits, he really hits. So I mean, obviously you're playing him in season long and all that kind of stuff, and then for showdown stuff, I guess that the way to play that kind of volatility is just to bet against the market. If the market is just loading up on Terry McLaurin, I think he's fine to fade. If you're getting a decent price, then you play him. And I guess the only way that he would be low owned would be like a high salary, but he's probably still playable at a high salary if the ownership is low enough.
Yeah, I'll tell you tomorrow how much Terry McLaurin I end up playing. All right, last one on this chart, and then we'll bring it on home with the final wide receiver chart. So we talked about Jauan Jennings, but his teammate Ricky Pearsall is also on this chart. Granted, he is in the opposite quadrant of Jauan Jennings. He's in the bottom left quadrant here. But who would you rather have rest of season, Ricky Pearsall or Jauan Jennings?
Oh, Jauan Jennings, like no question, zero question. I think I'm a noted, relative noted hater for Ricky Pearsall, where I think he's like kind of jaggy, and he has the first round draft capital, but his production is kind of jaggy, his usage kind of jaggy.
So I have a follow-up question, because I felt the same way as you, that it's Jauan Jennings pretty easily over Pearsall rest of the season. But what if we were drafting best ball teams today for next season?
Season?
Would you take Jauan Jennings or would you take Ricky Pearsall? They're back-to-back in this hypothetical way too early best ball.
Yeah, I mean, that for next season, that feels really close because all the production is so heavily in favor of Jauan Jennings, but then next season is so far away that like all these different things would happen. You probably like you can project Pearsall higher for next year than you can this year, but in terms of like this year, there's a big gap. The college production stuff is not that great, and you're just hanging on to that first round draft capital, which is very important. But like the more his NFL production matches his kind of mediocre college production, the less inclined I am to give weight to that first round draft capital.
Yeah, I think that is very well said. And with that, let's move on to the final chart. We're gonna safely make it in under 2 hours here, Draco, as long as we don't lollygag too much here. So the first guy I had a note on this chart is the one, the only bit of cream rising to the top of this chart of Cedric Tillman. He had the one very impressive game where he catches the big touchdown play. Then he has what should have been a pretty poor game, but then gets there in garbage time with Jameis before the bye. Now, coming off the bye, are you at all interested in Tillman against the Saints here? Like, how do you...
Yeah, I mean, he's interesting, but you're telling me I have to draft him ahead of, like, Drake London and JSN?
Yeah, yes.
I don't think that makes any sense.
What? Okay, like, Cedric Tillman or Jaden Reed?
That's probably Jaden Reed.
Yeah, Cedric Tillman or Devontae Adams?
Tillman.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, well, if you look at their raw target counts, so like Devontae, he had 13 targets last week. Tillman in the last 3 games is averaging 10 targets a game, but then his ADOT is like 11, 18, 12, and like so to me that's a lot friendlier of a target profile than what to me the Devontae targets are true old man, like 7-8 yard ADOT throws. Like I value the Tillman stuff more.
Okay, last one. Tillman or Jauan Jennings?
And that feels pretty close. That feels pretty close.
Market's way too low on Jennings. I mean, if you drafted off ADP, you'd literally never, and you had those guys ranked next to each other, you'd never go on Jennings. So, all right. This guy's an interesting one. What do you think of Xavier Legette with Adam Thielen coming back? Is it curtains for Legette? How are you approaching him?
So, I guess if you're looking at the last 5 games, he's been at an 84% route share. Last game is at 96. Given that he's the first round rookie, I don't think you can put that back. And if you look at his average targets per run, it's been at 18%, with a couple of spikes in there. It's hard. I truly don't want to give Adam Thielen too much respect, but it's a small pie, and if he takes a decent amount of it inefficiently, then that does hurt. Like, that Adam Thielen back does make me a little bit wary. Like, it's always like Legette was to actually play him was always kind of gross anyway, and so that additional fly makes it just that much more gross. Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with everything that you're saying. All right, we can move on to the last guy. John Mechie, so did not do much for the majority of the time that Nico has missed, but finally flashes a little bit in this last game that he'll have before Nico comes back. Do you think he did enough to kind of secure his role as the number 3 receiver in this offense with Nico back, or is Mechie just going to fade back into obscurity now? So who was the guy that they were playing ahead of him before? They had, what is his name? Xavier Hutchinson. Okay. So he had, I guess he had a good game where he had 6 targets, 74 yards, and then I think he had a touchdown as well. And then Hutchinson has done basically nothing. Yeah, Hutchinson basically nothing. I don't know. I'm to be honest, I'm not sure I care. Okay. Like, yeah, these are pretty periphery guys, and we pushed even further out now. Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, that was the last guy I had a note on. Is there anyone else you wanted to talk about here before we wrap up? I'm looking through this chart. No, not really. There's nobody here that we haven't spent. Or sorry, I don't want to say nobody, but most of the guys that we would speak about here, we've spent a decent amount of airtime discussing already. All right. Well, Drico, congratulations, sir. We did it. This might be one of the very few stat chasing episodes under 2 hours. Before we go, I do want to plug playoff best ball content over at Legendary Upside. Is going to be coming soon. We should be seeing some playoff best ball contests in the lobby at Underdog really any day now. We're going to have the Sidekick up and running for those. So if you're already subscribed to the Sidekick, you'll have that ready to rock and roll when we've got those contests out in the lobby. And then we'll also have some written content. We'll be doing some video content over on the Leg Up YouTube channel. We'll certainly have podcasts and things like that. So just make sure you're checking us out for all of your playoff best ball content. It is probably my favorite format of fantasy. So definitely would encourage you to check that out if you haven't played that before. Yeah, agreed. Always great content and a truly fantastic format. All right. With that, we will sign off here, and we will see you next week on our
typical date of Tuesday. Good luck the rest of this week.
See you next week, everyone, on Tuesday.